Well, this March 8th is International Women's Day. Marches are being held around the world to defend women's rights that are increasingly coming under attack. In Indonesia, for example, women gathered in front of parliament to urge lawmakers to pass a long-awaited bill to protect domestic workers. The UN chief, Antonio Guterres, has warned gender equality would take another 3 centuries to achieve, saying global progress on women's rights is vanishing before our eyes. Well, here in France, women make up 52% of the population, but just 3 of them are bosses on the top 40 listed companies. And there are just 18 female bosses out of the 120 biggest French businesses. We're going to take a closer look at that now with Elodie Andriot. Hello, Elodie.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So happy to have you. Now, you're the author of Patronne, which is a book about France's female CEOs. First of all, where'd you get the idea to write this book?
Well, I don't have children yet, but I have 5 nieces, age 6 to 18, and I wanted to show them these kind of women that don't usually make the cover. They're not from the entertainment world, but actually run a company either because, they climbed up the ladder in the corporate world, or they created the company. As you said, there are very few women. There's a lot of us. We're in majority, 52%, but, if you're looking at these female CEOs, not so much. And, what really shocked me is in the tech world, I thought it was going to be better in the startup world. But here in France, out of the top 120 startups, there's only 15 female founders. So I wanted to know who they were, how they got there, how we can all learn from their journey, and why there are so few of them in 2023.
Well, I guess that's really the question. Why are there so few of them in 2023?
Well, there's a thing called maternity, and I think Sherry Standard said it well 10 years ago in the book that, is still so current. But people tend to lean back during that time. Or maybe, they say, well, why don't you go to the headquarters? Don't say in operations, while you're having your kids. Meanwhile, these female CEOs, like Catherine McGregor, who's the head of Engie here in France, she stayed on these oil rigs, offshore of Scotland, offshore of Congo. She knew it was where it actually happens, and that's how she could climb it to the top. So I think the way it's being handled, and also in the private sphere, because if you look at home, 72% of domestic charge is still held by mothers, by women, and the devil really hides in those little details. It's that doctor appointment, it's, these appointments with the teachers. So I think that's the first reason why. The second reason is in some industries, in some sectors, there are no women. There's no pipeline. So in France, again, 26% of engineering school students are female, so that's not a lie. And in the tech world, it's only 90%. So I wanted to, I wanted to know how, those who made it to these top positions, how did they do it? How can we all learn?
Well, I guess that's another question as well. Is there a common thread between these women that you found? Is there some sort of thinking that women should have to get them to these C-suites?
Yes, as after the 20th, so I interviewed 52 of them, one by percentage. I wanted, to have a big diversity of profile. But, once I reached to the 20th interview, they all kind of said the same thing. And the first thing is, those women who succeed within the corporate ladder really at some point handle cash flow. And that's very important. There's an antechamber of power in these corporations. And that is if you're the head of a finance team, if you're the head of a commercial team, you have to have your hand on the till. And that just came back, story after story. Like Marie Guillemot, for example, who's the head of KPMG France. She used to be, the head of the commercial team. So that was the first thing. They've got a really big network, all of them. And network, what is network? It could be a dirty word. Is it, having, cigar after? What does it actually mean? And I think what it means for these women is really going after the people that have the same passions as you, that have the same values. Like Roxane Darza, for example, who's the head of Station F, the biggest startup campus, which is here in Paris. And she started off as, a student in Paris. She didn't know many people, and she wanted to meet the startups. And so she started this student project, which is a media, which was called Tech Baguette. And soon enough, she caught the eye of TechCrunch, and that's how she started her own network. So that's the second thing they have in common. And also, they tend to climb the glass cliff. So we all know the glass ceiling, but we don't know what the glass cliff is. The glass cliff is women don't make it to the top the same way men do. They actually tend to go for jobs. They hack their way in by accepting jobs that are a bit riskier. And that's how they make it, slowly but surely. And it just came back every single time in these interviews that I did.
There's one thing that you touched on briefly a moment ago, and that a few women mentioned in the book, is this notion that we were sold, perhaps as younger people, of having it all as women. And many of them say, quite frankly, they had to sacrifice things like their families for their jobs. Is that a common thread as well?
Well, yes. I mean, there's only 24 hours in a day, so you have to make decisions. And I think they all, some women in this book. So, for example, Anne Rigel, who's the head of Air France, her kids live 70 miles away from the airport where her job is. So, she's got this apartment just around the corner so that she can, that's the way she hacked it. Some people are getting help. Some people live in the same building that they work in, and I think every woman has to invent her own maternity, and I think, and every man has to invent his own paternity, and I think the way it's been handled needs to be rethink a little bit.
Elodie, thank you so much for coming in to speak to us on this International Women's Day. You are the author of Patronne, that's Bosses au Féminin, a book about France's female CEOs. Thank you very much.
Thank you.